But first, let's talk to the Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab. Good morning, Deputy Prime Minister.
Good morning.
I'd like to start with the murder of Arthur Labinjo-Hughes. Can you confirm that there will be an inquiry into this murder?
Yes, good morning, Trevor. And look, as a father of young boys myself, as a parent alone as Justice Secretary, I can't begin to imagine how anyone could be that cruel. Let me tell you exactly what we're doing. We've had those sentences for the two parents. The Attorney General's made clear she wants to have them reviewed, where we have a mechanism for doing so. There'll be a local safeguarding review which will look at the local authorities' actions, whether any lessons could have been picked up earlier, whether any warning flags could have been put up earlier. And the Prime Minister's made clear, as well as that, we want to see how social services and the local authorities liaise with the criminal justice agencies and what lessons further we can learn. This is the second case I've dealt with this week. I saw Tony Hudgell and his parents, Paula and Mark, another very, very sad case of child cruelty. We've immediately, and I announced, steps to increase the sentences. The most vulnerable in our society need to have the maximum protection.
Well, as you said, this is not the first time. We can go back through the roll call. Kaylee Jade Priest, Peter Connolly, Victoria Clambier. There's a list of horror that goes back more than 2 decades. And we already know part of the problem, don't we? Not enough social workers and perhaps not enough good training for those social workers. It's right to review, it's right to inquiry, but couldn't we get on with doing something about that? Because we know already that's part of the problem.
Well, there's a multi-dimensions to this. There's the fact that the individuals responsible for any of this cruelty could be so callous. There is also the local authority response, and I would say that I think the social workers on the front line do an incredible job. As part of the pandemic response, we've invested close to £5 billion in giving local authorities the support they need, because one of the things we know about lockdown, whilst lots of families enjoyed a bit more time together, for those that are the victims of domestic abuse, it has been a very serious time. Some of those risks have been magnified, and we're taking the action we also need to take, as I announced with the announcement this week of Tony's Law, tougher sentences for those who would commit this unimaginable cruelty on children.
But isn't this rather like the Victoria Clambier case, where the inquiry by Lord Laming, way back in the early 2000s, spotted, I think it was 17 different occasions where the social services could have intervened but didn't for a variety of reasons. And this case, Arthur Labinjo-Hughes, echoes that precisely. Isn't that really where we ought to be focusing our attention right now?
Look, I think it's part of the picture. I don't think there's a silver bullet answer to this. I mean, you've got to ask how anyone could commit this kind of unimaginable cruelty, why we've got families that might countenance, let alone commit such abuse. It's right that we look at the criminal justice end, and in between that, I think the job of social workers, particularly those looking at children of at particular risk, we need to learn the lessons. Of course, it's very difficult for social workers on the front line.
Especially if there aren't enough of them.
Yes, but this is often reduced to the question of resources. I've just explained that during the pandemic we've put in, I think it was 4.8 billion, close to £5 billion, but they do an incredibly difficult job. It's very finely balanced. On the one hand, they need to make sure they've got the engagement, the relationship, that those families talk to them. On the other hand, of course, the top priority has got to be looking for those risks, reading the signs, which may only be subtle, and then with the benefit of hindsight, be more obvious. But at the time, I do think, though, we've got to make sure, if you like, a more precautionary approach, which looks at the risk to those particularly vulnerable young children and see what more we can do to read those signs earlier and better.
All right, let's discuss the precautionary principle on a larger scale. We're talking now about COVID. Last night we got a new travel ban. Actually, you should have applied the precautionary principle a week ago, shouldn't you? It's too late.
Well, in relation to the Omicron variant, we actually acted quicker than I think any other country in the world, perhaps with the exception of Israel, in putting travel restrictions on people coming from countries, particularly in Africa. In relation to the PCR tests for people coming into this country, look, I know that that's a burden for the travel industry, but we have made huge strides in this country. We've got 80% of those over 12 double jab now. We've got a third of the country with a third jab or a booster. We've got to take the measures targeted forensically to stop the new variant seeding in this country to create a bigger problem. We're going into this Christmas in a far, far better state. We can enjoy Christmas this year in a way that we couldn't last year. That is a testament to the vaccine programme, in particular the boosters, which are protecting us through this winter, the colder months, with also the risks from the variants. So actually, I think we have done the right thing. We've taken a balanced approach, but we're always alert to extra risks that take us back, not forward.
Your number one priority is still to protect the NHS. There's some data emerging this morning which says that 90% of those in hospital, in COVID beds, are unvaccinated, and that takes up 20% of critical care beds. Wouldn't it make sense, if you want to protect the NHS, to do something about that? Other countries are now moving towards mandatory vaccination. Shouldn't we be making sure that people who basically are endangering others suffer some consequences before they take up that 90% of beds?
Well, look, first of all, can I say that, again, if you look at the data, yes, there's been some extra transmission of the virus because of Omicron. But actually, if you compare the data this week compared to last week, and we look at this very carefully, hospitalisations are down, deaths as a result of COVID are down. In relation to occupancy in NHS and the beds that you described...
Which is pre-Omicron.
Yes, of course. Look, we are absolutely clear people should get the jab. They should get double jab. They should get the booster when it's available. I'm not convinced that wholesale straitjacket mandatory vaccinations, other than in those settings where it's really required, like social care and for staff working in the NHS in hospitals, I'm not convinced that would be effective. Whether it's fair and right and morally the right thing to do. We've got to make sure that those who are vaccine hesitant, if you like, have got the confidence to do it. And anyone that is reading the data, reading the efficacy of what the vaccines can achieve, including against Omicron with the latest research that we have published on Friday, this must be the right thing to do. So I set the premise of your question, which is anyone that isn't having the vaccine is putting themselves, but also other people in our community at risk. I'm just not sure.
And they're lengthening that 6 million person waiting list.
Well, then you've got to answer me that question. I'm not convinced it will be an effective thing to do to say everyone has got to compulsorily have the vaccine. What we want to do is say, get it done. It's the right thing to do. You should have the vaccine. It's irresponsible not to have the vaccine. That's the approach we're taking.
All right, look, on Omicron, to put it at its most blunt, not that many people have died compared to what we've seen with Delta. There is a case for saying that what you're doing is a bit of an overreaction.
Well, we'll always get the Goldilocks criticism of too much, too little. I think we've taken the right approach. We're focused on the vaccines, the boosters. We've got a third of the population over 12 with a third vaccine injection or with a booster. But we are taking the measures, and we've seen that with travel, and I know some people will feel overburdened by that, to say, look, we are going to prevent the variants, Omicron and others coming in, and what's called reseeding in the UK, because we've got to make sure that we bank the progress that we've made, go into Christmas, have a great Christmas, and go into the new year bouncing back. We've got the economy expanding, jobs are up, wages are up. We've got to, as well as make sure we protect everyone's health and lives and safety, also make sure we protect livelihoods. I think we've taken a balanced approach.
I was hoping you wouldn't bring up Christmas, but you have, so let me just ask you
Why were you hoping I wouldn't bring up Christmas?
Because I now have to ask you the tabloid question. It's a Christmas season.
Yeah.
Some ministers are telling us that we can have parties. Some are telling us that we can't do what's natural under the mistletoe. Now, I see that the Conservative Party chairman, Oliver Dowden, is going ahead with the party headquarters Christmas party. Have you sorted out the Ministry of Justice Christmas party? You're going to have one, I take it?
Well, first of all, the rule's very clear. People can go in and have Christmas parties. Of course, employers will want to think common sense about how they do that. We don't want to substitute for that discretion and that common sense. We won't be having a Ministry of Justice-wide Christmas party this year, but we'll be having, I think, appropriate drinks at a smaller scale.
What does an appropriate drink look like in this context? And I'm not... you may want to reflect on what happened last year, but what does an appropriate drink... I mean, this is quite a serious point, actually, because lots of us are being asked to join our colleagues. What is right and what is wrong here? What's advised?
Well, so the right thing to do is for every employer to take a common sense view. We want... Let me be absolutely clear. Government wants people to be able to enjoy Christmas this year. That means people should feel free to go and enjoy those celebrations, and every employer will think about the right way to do it. And I'm the same as anyone else.
So you're not really offering any guidance?
No, we are. We're saying the guidance we're offering is we say, first of all, you can have those Christmas events. Second of all, we want to allow the common sense discretion of employers to make the right call.
All right, let's move on to your own particular area. You are signalling today, and I think this week, that you're going to get tough on county lines. You're really trying to make some progress on some issues of crime. Let's just start, if I may, with the incredibly important issue of rape. Yeah. And you're preparing to offer greater rights to people who've suffered that particular crime. What are you actually proposing on rape?
So we'll set out some proposals later on this week, but first of all, we're going to be publishing scorecards, both for general crime but also for rape, which means we can see exactly where the system is working and exactly where it isn't working, whether it's at the police stage, the prosecution stage, prosecutions getting to court. I'm hosting a tech summit tomorrow. One of the things that we're looking at in relation to the rape review, and we're going to be publishing our 6-monthly update on where we've got to. That was an action plan announced in June. We're going to be showing how we've made progress. One of the things we're looking at is how tech can drive up prosecutions, whether it's the ability to get swifter readouts from mobile phones from victims that come forward, so they're not deprived of their mobile phone for long. We know that that's something that undermines confidence in coming forward to the police. One of the particular things that I've been looking at is what's called Section 28, pre-recorded testimony for the victims of rape. We've been trialling this in a number of Crown courts. I actually think this is something we need to roll out nationally. I want to look at the right way to do that. The advantage that it has for a victim is that they have the opportunity to give their evidence without being through the additional trauma of the glare of the courtroom. And that can secure more prosecutions, but it also can encourage earlier guilty pleas. So I think it's the right thing to do, but it's also an effective way of driving up those prosecutions.
The tech will help. And I know you won't particularly like to get onto this territory, but let's be clear. The CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, say that the appallingly low level of rape convictions is in part due to the fact they don't have enough people. The cops say that their inability to gather evidence and bring forward successful cases is also down to a lack of resources. Where's the new money to make this work?
Well, actually, at the spending review, we secured extra money for the Ministry of Justice. I've got a 12% real-term increase, the largest for a decade. That means that we can fund, and the attorney is responsible for the CPS, but we can fund the prosecutions. And in particular, in my area, the independent sexual violence advisors that support victims through. Because we know if victims just say they don't want to go through with a trial, not only is that terrible denial of justice for them, but we don't get the prosecutions and bang up the people, lock up the people that are responsible. I think there's also something, I mean, you touched on it, there's a little bit of finger-pointing that goes on in the system. You have operational independence for the police, the CPS, of course, for the judiciary. One of the things that we've been trialling and rolling out is what's called Operation Soteria, which means that the prosecutors and the police look when they get a case, not just constantly scrutinising the victim if they made inconsistencies in what they said, but the rigour goes on scrutinising what the suspect has done and what the suspect has said. That, along with the other measures, is helping to drive up confidence in the system. And again, we want to roll that out nationally too over time.
The low conviction rate does not inspire confidence in women. We know that. And one other thing that we know is a problem is that women are reluctant to come forward and report rape or sexual assault because they do not have confidence in the way they will be treated by the police. We only have to say the words Sarah Everard to explain what that means. What are you doing to restore that confidence?
So there's a whole range of things that we'll announce this week. But let me just give you a flavour. So first of all, these criminal justice scorecards, which will be for generic crime, but also for rape particularly, and in the new year we'll break them down for localised areas, will show not just victims, but the whole of a community, the public, where we're getting it right and where we're getting it wrong. I think that's important. I'm also going to be announcing this week a consultation on a victims law, which will put victims in relation to rape and sexual violence, but also across the board, at the centre of what the criminal justice process does. I think morally that's the right thing to do. I think justice is there for the victims. I think also, frankly, from an operational point of view, making sure victims have got confidence in the system, hang on through, not just to report it to the police. We've actually seen an increase in reporting to the police, but are willing then to willing then to go to trial. That is the way we give them the confidence, but we also, frankly, from a data point of view, from a results point of view, drive up the number of convictions.
But the issue here is police behaviour. What are you and your colleague over at Home Office saying to the police about the way they behave?
Well, in the aftermath of Sarah Everard and the issue around Wayne Couzens, there are all sorts of reviews that have been put in place to see both in relation to whether the warning signs should have been heeded earlier about Wayne Couzens, but also things like systematic practice, cultural points about whether whether sexism, frankly, is being dealt with properly in the police. So those things are being dealt with. I think this issue of the cooperation, the coordination, the collaboration between prosecutors and the police, though, is absolutely critical. We respect the operational independence of both, but Operation Soteria shows you how a more collaborative approach, more transparency, frankly, a little bit more evaluation and assessment of what's going on, seeing the breakdown, where those local police forces and prosecutorial teams are innovating and driving up results. We want to say, if you can do it there, why not spread that best practice across the country? I think that's what gives victims hope.
OK, I just don't need to... I mean, this is a politics programme, so let me just ask you one question about politics. You won in Bexley, but actually part of the reason that you didn't do as bad as you might have done is, or that you did do as badly as you did, rather, is that Nigel Farage's party, Reform Party, took 7% of the votes. They kept their deposit. Are you worried about the return of Farage?
Look, we worry about delivering for the people of this country, whether it's on vaccines, the economy, criminal justice. But I would just say on Bexley and Sidcup, for a government 2 years in, we took over half of the vote.
That isn't the question I asked you. I asked you about Nigel Farage. You're worried about Nigel Farage coming back to politics.
But I think that for us in government, particularly as the Conservatives, we should be focusing on the people's priorities, which is not worrying about the political competition, is worrying about delivering for the people of this country. In Bexley and Sidcup, we secured, again, 2 years in for a government from the last election, time where historically we come under a lot of pressure at by-elections. We secured over half the vote with this great candidate, Louis French, who I will campaign with, and we're going to continue focusing on the people's priorities.